And welcome everybody to another Rob Mullins jazz piano video tutorial. Today we're going to talk about the Jazz Piano Voicings book, and this is going to be part 2, which is going to focus on the use of bass parts on the piano in your left hand, along with the chord voicings we talked about in part 1 in the right hand. So if you have the book, turn to page 18 and get ready. If you don't, the worksheet for today's class is at planetmullins.com slash ws2.pdf. So you can grab that. Now, one of the things that I talked about and really stressed in part 1 was the need for a bass player and the need for you to think in terms of bass as your foundation. Then you have your comping chord, and then you have your melody on top. So I've played a lot of duo gigs in my lifetime, and duo gigs a lot of times for a keyboard player really help. They help keep you working. You can take one of those kinds of gigs and you can do 2 people's jobs at once. You can do the bass job, and you can also do the piano job or the comping job at the same time. But every jazz pianist should learn, what do the bass notes do, how do they function, and how to play bass lines that make sense. Now, in the book, as I said, starting on page 18, you got to remember that in order to write out all the possible bass lines there are in the world, it would be a 20,000 page book. And I was able to get it down to about 200 pages. But if you think about jazz music, there's really 2 kinds of feels. There's the straight 8th note feel, and there's the swung 8th note feel. So we're going to start here with the ascending major chords, position 1. And if you missed part 1, that's this. And that's happening in your right hand. Your bass note is down here. And then you have 3, 5, 6, 9. That's a position 1 with a 3rd on the bottom there. This is my left hand, and this is my right hand. Okay. So an easy, relaxed tempo is good for learning these. These are just chromatic major chords going up the scale, and it sounds something like this. And I'm just going to focus on those first few chords there. It goes all the way through the chromatic scale, but we're just going to bite off this thing in chunks and kind of work with it one step at a time, okay? So first thing about playing bass parts on a piano, think like a bass player. Bass players do not have sustain pedals. So you would never hold down your pedal and do this kind of a thing to sound like Ron Carter, for example. It makes no sense because it's a single note. You have to tie all the notes together. And I put a little accent on the 2nd and the 4th note to kind of simulate a snare drum. Play it a little bit louder on beat 2 and 4. And that'll give it a little bit of a lilt in there and kind of an accent, because in duos, you generally don't have a drummer. It's going to be you playing a keyboard bass or some sort of a electric piano or a combination, and a singer, a trumpet player, saxophone player, something like that. The next step about these bass lines is that they're written very simply in the book, but you just have to listen to bass players play and kind of figure out some of the stuff that they do. Because if you just play these quarter notes all the time, it's not going to be fun and it isn't going to sound good. So the first thing I like to do is put in a few little ghost notes in there, other notes to kind of help the swing along, something like this. So I'm going. at the end of bar 2 there to just have some variety. And if I put that with a chord on top, that really helps bring it alive. It gives it a little bit more of a vibe. You can do these licks down, that kind of a triplet thing. Ba-da-da-da. Bass players do that a lot on the upright. That sort of deal. So many ways to improve this. This is just a starting elemental bass line. So you have to add some creativity and some study to this in order to have your bass part sound authentic. So one other quick note about this is that I know a lot of people that watch these educational videos, mine and others, don't know how to read music, and this could look like total Greek to them. So I've organized the 4 different ways that you can learn this. One, you can learn it by ear, okay? So you can just use your ears, figure out what these notes are while you're sitting at your keyboard. Number 2 is you can use the staff, which is, the grand staff is what I'm using here on this book excerpt. Number 3, you can just do it all numerically. You can just think, okay, I'm going 1, 5, 1 here. And in this hand, it's 3, 5, 6, 9. And that's just learning it by the numbers. When I first started this stuff, I was a drummer taking drum lessons, and I didn't know anything about the staff, and I didn't know anything about these numbers. So what I would do is I would listen to, Miles Davis and Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie records, and just write down on a piece of notebook paper the notes by alphabet name. So that's number 4. You can just write down C, G, C, G with an arrow showing the upward direction or the downward direction if you don't know how to read music. I mean, obviously, the more tools that you can get to throw at learning this stuff, the better off you're going to be. So to review, you can learn it by ear, you can learn it by the grand staff, you can memorize the numbers, and you can use the alphabet letters. And in a perfect world, you'll be doing all of those things. Okay. So now you don't want to play whole notes in the right hand when you're comping all the time, because that gets super annoying and boring. So you can just put some rhythm in there. I'm going to do a dotted quarter note and an eighth note, sometimes called the Killer Joe rhythm. So now we have this. And all of a sudden it's starting to come to life. And you sound like you could actually leave your basement and go make $75. All right. Or maybe 150 if you're replacing the bass player on a gig. All right. So that's position 1, walking bass. Now that's the swing feel. I'm going to go on page 18, page 19, going on to page 20. On page 20 is the Latin bass, or the straight eighth note bass. And that is very simple, but it's got to be played a specific way. And these things are not always going to, if you play them like a classical player, they're not going to sound good. And, anything you see on a staff is an approximation of what a groovy sound is. So here I've got. And you might recognize that a very similar bass line in jazz to this I've written out in the book is Song for My Father by Horace Silver. These kinds of patterns are just the nuts and bolts of playing straight eighth note time in jazz. And you've only got 2 feels, really. You got the straight eighth note and the swung eighth note. So now I'm going to do both hands together here. listen to how I'm tying this bone. And that last note of the bar at bar 3, that's long. It's not short. You know, you don't want to play it staccato because that's just not groovy. So see, I'll go on from the D major chord. Still pretty boring, but this is foundational work. This is the stuff that you have to do before you actually go out and try and play in a group, because this is your personal work. This is your practice time. This is your personal study. You got to do plenty of that in order to go out and feel confident. I know I did. Okay. So when you put a rhythm in the right hands in a Latin tune, the best reference that you can do is to study what clave parts are. And if you don't know what a clave is, it's a percussion instrument. It's basically 2 sticks that you hit together, and they have a very specific sound. And I like the reverse clave rhythm over this. That sort of a deal. And I know this looks really boring on paper and sounds awful when you play it really slow, but let me speed it up for you and see if it sounds a little better. Right? Now all of a sudden we're getting somewhere. So if I change the chords up and do something like 1 6 dominant, 2 dominant, 5 altered thing, it can be pretty cool. Right? Sounds pretty cool. So there you go. That's the majority of the other parts of the Jazz Piano Voicings book and how to work with them. And don't forget, guys, gals, go ahead and grab a bass player out of your school or your church if you can, because it's always more fun to play music with other people. You know, I keep saying in these videos that playing solo piano is the hardest thing to do, and it really is, because you've got to keep the bass and the chords and the melody going. But good applications in this book for people that want to play in duos, especially if you're trying to play some jazz tunes. Great American Songbook, and some Latin stuff like Sway and Girl from Ipanema, even Spain by Chick Corea. You can use that Latin stuff that I just showed you to get through all of those situations. So thanks again for watching. I hope you learned something today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll hope to see you guys around soon at another jazz piano lesson on the internet. Rob Mullins here, signing out. Take care and have a great day.